Hello and welcome to one of the friendliest cities in the UK. Yes, we're in Liverpool, where we've brought 8 artists down to the city's famous Riverside and Royal Albert Dock. Lord have mercy, it's a brand new episode of Landscape Artist of the Year.
2,000 applications, 48 artists, 8 pods, 6 heats in the art competition that brings the landscape into your living room.
I'm having a great time. It's brilliant.
Getting hot now, feeling the heat.
This year we've travelled around the UK visiting iconic locations, from romantic Scottish ruins to historic urban cityscapes.
Very rocky underfoot. I couldn't wear my high heels today, which is a shame.
Come rain or shine, and watched by our biggest crowds ever, the artists have just 4 hours to push their creative talents to the limit.
I'm feeling really great. Does that sound convincing?
The prize they're competing for is a £10,000 commission for the Science Museum, celebrating the stark beauty of Orkney and its key role in the sustainable energy revolution.
What will it mean if you go through?
It would mean that.
But first, their artwork will be scrutinised by the critical eyes of our 3 resident art experts: Kathleen Soriano, Taishan Schierenberg and Kate Bryan.
You can come and do my downstairs bathroom for me.
And at every heat, we're joined by a further 50 artists. It's the Landscape Artist Wildcards, bringing flair, enthusiasm and a whiff of danger.
It's needle felting. It's good for frustration, very stabby.
So sit back, relax and join us as we continue the search for the next Landscape Artist of the Year.
You said you're going to finish early and have another sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you need a duvet or a pillow?
Today we've brought 8 artists to Liverpool's famous Dockside. Georgina Saunders, a primary school teacher from Hertfordshire. Staffordshire-based artist Rose Jones. Nathaniel Fowles, a supply teacher living in West Sussex. And from Leicester, graphic designer and art tutor Anil Patel.
It's a beautiful morning. It's lovely and calm, but I'm not.
Oh!
Great start.
Also taking part today are James Murch, an artist living in Devon. Brighton-based chef Wesley Smith. Judy Milner, a keen plein-air painter from London. And from just across the water in Birkenhead, painter and decorator Matthew Timmins-Williams.
I didn't get a wink of sleep last night. I was very nervous. I was up early, pacing around the house, trying not to lose my composure.
Our artists were all chosen by the judges on the strength of a submission landscape, which they brought with them today to hang in their pods. But now they must unpack and contemplate the task ahead.
I'm really looking forward to doing some painting, really. So the only thing I'm really worried about is making a bit of a wally of myself and the heat.
Artists, you have just 4 hours to complete your winning works of art. Good luck to all of you. Your time starts now.
The landscape facing today's artists on Liverpool's waterfront is a study in perspective, encompassing old and new architecture, from the Victorian red brick of the Great Western Railway warehouse to the twisted white stone of the Museum of Liverpool.
I like the combination of modern architecture and history. I just got to be careful I don't get bogged down in detail.
I love to be in a more rural landscape, so I think it's absolutely stunning, but I find it's a little bit scary to begin with.
I think this might possibly be the most complicated landscape we've ever given our pods. I mean, it's got everything, absolutely everything in it.
You're right, it's very complex, but you could also say we've spoilt them for choice. And I think that's what makes Liverpool such an exciting city, that you just have these layers and layers and layers.
From a geometric point of view as well, I think it gives you some wonderful shapes.
It's so dramatic.
I've noticed that some of the artists that we've got on the pod today are sort of containing their scales in order to get what they need to get done in the time.
Right.
But actually what scares me a little bit is that this is so big.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of bring that all down and make it sort of meaningful and strong at the same time? Challenges. Lots of good challenges.
Faced with such a jumble of architectural styles, our artists must decide whether or not to simplify the view. But one seems to be making things even more complicated.
The kind of painter I am really does vary. I just don't want to do a literal painting, distort things. Just take a quick photo. Wow. Perspective. That's amazing.
Anil Patel is a graphic designer and art tutor from Leicester. His submission in oils is a view of the cooling towers behind East Midlands Parkway station and demonstrates his fascination with manipulating unusual urban scenes.
And what a beautiful looking painting.
Thank you very much.
Very different to your submission, which is a lot moodier. And I think the mood is conjured through the light.
Yeah.
We're going for a different looking picture.
Yeah.
Right, so this is a painting I can see already just full of perspective. And Liverpool has really, gone head first into an exploration of 21st century architecture.
Absolutely.
The fact that some of these buildings are so experimental, does that make it hard for you as an artist? Because you almost have to make sure that they're believable in paint.
It does, because when I did my power station, I distorted it so you can get away with elements. This is already distorted. Some of those buildings are already distorted, so they are wonky already. But I will have to make the Liver building a bit wonky as well to match. I'm not going to do a literal painting.
Yeah. You're going to do it your way.
Absolutely.
Also looking for a composition that will capture today's jigsaw puzzle of a view, our next artist has decided to start with the irregular skyline.
Space, shapes and structure are what interests me the most. I'm drawn by the distant horizon, creating one continuous outline of the buildings. It's a composition I like, so fingers crossed, I'm doing all right.
Artist Judy Milner trained as a sculptor at the Royal College of Art and lives and works in London. Her submission is a view of Ascot Racecourse, painted in oils and demonstrating her gestural, semi-abstract style.
Judy, you're quite a messy painter, aren't you?
To start off with and possibly to end with, I don't know.
Looking at your submission, I mean, there is that sort of freshness and looseness and energy to it.
I guess so, yeah. It's a record of a moment.
And when you're dealing with architecture that's incredibly precise, there's so much in it. You've managed to find a little slice through and a view through.
The passageway and the Liver building, I like this line. You can make a continuous line of that horizon. The structure is going to contain my mess somehow, hopefully.
Well, it's got a lovely energy to it. I love the way you've got the Museum of Liverpool sort of taking us to that lovely sightline and that empty sky. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Our 8 artists aren't the only ones on the Liverpool waterfront today. Arriving at the docks are a further 50 landscape artists of all ages and experience. It's the Landscape Artist Wildcards, and they're setting up their easels right behind the pods.
Wow, what a view. Isn't it fantastic? And it's nice for the wildcards to be so close to the pod artists, and I'm going to look and see what they're doing today later as well.
Atmosphere here is like, I met few people and it was lovely and everyone's really friendly and it's a nice sunny day.
Funnily enough, I actually turned up with my easel this morning. Within 5 minutes, I lost a screw, it broke. I've tried to fix it a few times, it hasn't panned out. So, lap it is.
They're all competing for just one wildcard place at this year's semi-final.
It's the best spot in the whole area.
It is, it's not bad at all.
It's a cool breeze.
Yeah.
Got your umbrella. Do you mind if I stay here for the rest of the day?
You're welcome to.
Yeah. Didn't bring any tea with you, did you?
With the wildcards settling in for the day, just in front of them, our next artist has brought along some of the tools of his trade.
I choose bare plyboard to work on because I like how the colours sink into the grain of the wood. and it adds extra layers of depth that I can build up a picture on. I like acrylics because they dry fast, and I can move on to the next stage pretty quickly.
Local mural artist and painter and decorator Matthew Timmins Williams lives in Birkenhead. In his submission, An Evening Scene of a Harbour on the Isle of Mull, he used large blocks of colour to swiftly capture the moment.
Matthew, let's talk about your submission. It's a dark night, there's a cemetery, and that graveyard's great. But it's more the mark making, really. The way you've made the light.
That's that number.
It looks like you enjoy the way paint goes down.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Just kind of brief marks, just kind of working quick.
Now, we've given you this really complex view.
I've definitely got an idea of a composition that I want to work with.
You started with this very quick sketch. Are you seeing possibilities?
That big black building was going to work quite nicely. It's got a lot of different reflections, and it's a great backdrop for everything else that's in front of it. So I can add a bit of layers, a bit of depth to the overall thing.
Well, I can't wait to see this happen. So I'll let you
too. Thanks very much.
Get on with it. Thank you.
Cheers. I think I might actually include the cobblestones here in the foreground as well as what's going on in the background. And I love the balance of old and new here, really. That's what I'm going to be focusing on, I think.
Nathaniel Fowles is a supply teacher living in West Sussex. His stylised works feature accentuated colours, as in his submission oil painting of Battersea Power Station, which took him a mere 10 years to complete.
Nathaniel, I was a bit worried about all of you this morning, actually, because I thought we'd given you rather too much, but you've just embraced it. And I suppose what it's done is it's given you a lovely foreground, middle ground, and then distance as well. So you've used it.
Yeah, that's what I like.
Really well. And I can see that you were working it out in these lovely sketches beforehand.
What I quite like is this... Well, I like the cobblestones. I like the pattern of the cobblestones.
Yeah.
There's a lot of texture there, but there's also these lines taking you off into the distance.
You've got fantastic bones of it there already, I can see, but looking at your painting style in your submission, you know, it's quite a dry, sort of chalky application of paint. It looks like it takes quite a long time.
Painted over 10 years.
Right. Slightly less time today. There's still quite a lot to do, isn't there? We could come back in 10 years' time, leave you here.
It's going to happen.
We're going to get on with it.
OK.
At the end of the first hour, our artists have settled on their compositions, but this complex scene is constantly presenting new challenges.
The reflection on that big black building is causing me some trouble, but I'm getting there, I think.
It's really quite tricky working out where different things are in proportion to other things. So I'm quite pleased about how I've actually been able to, I hope, get things in the right place.
That hour's gone really quick. I've been blocking everything out. Don't go too much detail too soon. Stay relaxed and really go for it.
On Liverpool's historic waterfront, 8 artists are getting to grips with this unique cityscape. And presented with the panoramic view, our next artist has chosen to zoom in.
Given that I'm quite a meticulous painter, I'm going to have to edit myself carefully today. There's so much here, but I am really liking the look of the foreground where these boats are stored. And then this Great Western Railway. It's such a contrast from the stuff behind.
Wesley Smith is a chef from Brighton. His submission is a nocturnal study of a deserted street near his home during lockdown. It's painted in acrylics and is brimming with detailed observation.
Wesley, good morning.
Morning.
So I personally feel that you've got an advantage looking at your submission. You painted a street view, you liked activity, architecture, shapes, street lamps. But I just love the fact that basically the star of your submission is 2 bins.
They provide a really nice focal point. It just happens to be bins.
So You've decided that you're going for literally what's in front of you here with this old railway. Like, it speaks of the past, it's quite quaint. You've got these fantastic verticals and horizontals, and you've really emphasised that in the sketch. You've had to edit an awful lot out, you know, in order to be able to find that view.
Yeah. For me, the buildings in the back are such a strong contrast. I'm considering not even putting that stuff in there and just sort of dropping the sky down.
Well, it's a beautiful underpainting in, like, a burnt orange and this beautiful grey. It's a really good-looking sketch.
When I paint a landscape, I tend to use quite big brush strokes, so it stops me getting too fiddly with the detail. I quite like it when it's a little bit more abstracted up close, and then when it's further away, it comes together a little bit more.
Georgina Saunders is a primary school teacher from Hertfordshire. Her large-scale submission in oils was painted from a photograph she took whilst walking in the Cumbrian hills at sunset.
Georgina, so tell me about scale. What does that allow you to do?
Be a bit more free with my arm and get some nice brush strokes in, and stops me getting so fiddly with the detail.
OK. And in your submission, I can see that there's a range of styles. You've got sort of looser in the foreground, and then it sort of gets tighter and tighter.
The focus is on that river, so I chose a slightly smaller brush.
And will we see a similar approach today? Is there an area of focus that you've already identified?
I do like the shape of that dark building that cuts across.
Yeah.
I want to have that as the focus. But now I'm struggling for time a bit, so we shall see.
Well, you know, it's got a great structure and great thrust to it already. I can see that you've still got an awful lot to do.
Yes.
So these docks are interesting, aren't they? In that they had this former life, they've been repurposed. So you have a thriving area that has all these remnants of its former existence.
It's a very peculiar jumble of building styles. I mean, in a funny way, it doesn't look like it's been planned. Of course it has been, but there is a kind of sense of chaos as well. But for an artist, it's ideal.
Yeah, there's so many ingredients for your stew.
And however you frame it, there are sort of different textures, different times, different sort of registers. There's so much to work from. Also in what they're made of, all this glass and sleekness.
Yeah.
And in the older buildings, you've got texture and detail and decoration.
There's lots of people. The wild cards are near the pods. I wonder how that'll affect the artists.
I think it's very exciting. It sort of creates an atmosphere of we're all working together here. We're all working together to try and make sense of this place. So it's interesting what's been regenerated and what has been kept as it was. I presume these cobbles, they feel pretty original.
Yeah, very rocky underfoot. I couldn't wear my high heels today, which is a shame.
And behind the pods, our wildcards are valiantly cobbling together some landscapes of their own.
So I was really intrigued by your work when I went past it. It sort of feels misty and rainy and cooler there than it is today. It feels quite soulful.
Well, that's kind of how I see the view. I really like the girders and all the black, so I'm just trying to put that in.
Tell me what this is.
This is my watering can here for my watercolours. I normally use a plastic bottle, but I find these plant misters give a much better performance.
It's a beautiful implement, and it obviously works better as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Jan, what is going on? You've got this, so is that going to be 6 separate...
Views, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to do more.
Why so many?
Because I get bored.
Well, I'll let you get on with your 622 different paintings.
Thank you.
Over in the pods, and faced with the complicated geometry of this ultimate urban landscape, our next artist is feeling very far from home.
My studio is based in a country park, so I tend to paint more kind of natural scenes, but I'm quite excited by something a bit more architectural. I'm trying to simplify it slightly with the modern building kind of against the older buildings.
Artist James Murch lives in rural Devon and took part in Landscape Artist of the Year in 2019. His submission, an oil painting of the garden by his studio, demonstrates his love of colour and form in nature.
James, your submission from the depths of the rhododendron bush.
Yes.
What grabbed you? It is the rhythm of the trunks and the light, isn't it, really?
It is, absolutely. It was later in the afternoon, so the sun was kind of behind and coming through the rhododendrons.
And now we put you in front of this massive bit of building. Tell me how you're going to tackle today.
Well, I'm going to build it up in sort of basic shapes and try and indicate details. I like the fact that these two modern buildings look a bit like dogs kind of going for the older buildings.
Yeah, attacking it. Even the angle is sort of coming
in.
James, a very robust compositional choice to start with. Good luck.
While most of today's artists are using paints, one has made a challenging choice given the bright sunshine.
I really like drawing from life. I never know quite what medium I'm going to use. I use pencils quite often at the moment, and I'm a big fan of black paper.
Former textile designer Rose Jones is from Staffordshire. Her submission in coloured pencils on black paper is a view of her beloved garden and shows her interest in finding pattern and texture in the landscape.
Rose, what is it about the black paper?
I think it's a fascination with how it throws the colours up, so the colours look really bright. I like how you can obliterate most of it if you want to and just leave little outlines, or you can use it as part of the drawing.
I'm looking at your submission and I can see you did exactly the same there.
I do like negative shapes, so with the trees I enjoyed the shapes between them, and I didn't draw the trees, I drew the sky in between it. And I might do that around the buildings today.
But what you've done here is you've got a lot of solid single colour with nothing in it, so to speak, whereas your submission is very busy with lots of information in it. I'm going to have to come back later, I think, and see what's going on.
OK.
On such a beautiful summer's day, the Liverpudlians are out in force. But at the halfway mark, are our artists feeling the heat or keeping their cool?
I regret maybe not keeping it a bit simpler. There's no detail here yet, and so everything is worrying me at this stage.
I've built a structure to work on. The biggest worry for me is the lighting, the way the sun moves, but the buildings don't move with it.
I put the shadows in, and now I'm starting to draw out some of the colour and try and get the canvas covered, just trying to get through it as quickly as possible. Right now, I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't have gone so big.
On a roasting day in Liverpool, 8 artists are halfway through the day's painting and the mercury is rising.
Getting hot now, feeling the heat. This is probably the most painful bit, where it's all sketchy, but everything's in place. I need to quickly fill in a few more big empty spaces and then start with the finer detail.
James, you've got people in your painting.
Yeah, I've popped a few in.
Because you are in charge of that canvas.
Yeah, that's right.
You can do whatever you like.
Not sure whether I'm quite happy with it just yet. I think the contrast needs pushing and the colour's punching up a bit.
Well, you're certainly looking the part.
Cheers.
Got your painter beard on.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, you can't fail to succeed.
Nathaniel, I've been walking past watching you paint. You're putting down blocks or marks, and the painting or the scene is appearing. Tell me, what's happening in that brain of yours as you're working? What are you responding?
Mild panic, I think. But
I get a sense that the bones of the scaffolding of this is in place.
Once you've got a good structure, like an armature, you can build on it more easily, I think. But there's so much going on. I'm trying to actually simplify it. Got my ice cream.
As both artists and ice creams reach melting point, what do the judges think of the artworks at the halfway stage?
So this little stretch of cobbled land bursting with creativity and some great art being made, hopefully. Wesley's submission was very detailed. Has he got enough time today on his painting?
This beautiful little station leading up to it, there's a lot of sort of no man's land with bits and bobs which are very difficult to paint. I don't know whether he's going to get it done.
I'm glad that Wesley chose this subject. I think the sketch painting he did this morning was gorgeous. If he adds too much detail, we're going to end up with something that's very difficult to read.
Well, someone who's not lost in detail is Georgina, who is giving us these big sweeping lines.
What she's capturing, which I haven't seen so much in the others, is there's a real sense of movement and energy.
I think it's a really interesting way of approaching the intensity and complexity of this view. You know, by virtue of working in these broad strokes, you can reduce everything down quite instantaneously.
James is very meticulous. There are charts, there are diagrams. Has he done too much of that and not enough painting?
The bones of it are there, but it's sort of emerging from the top down. And I'm hoping that over the course of this afternoon, he'll put in some of that detail. But I like the way James works.
His main subject matter is verdant vegetation. You can be loose and suggestive, with architecture less so. It's a work in progress. I'm slightly worried.
Rose is working on that black paper, but is it a right choice for a day like today?
You start with something which is so flat. I really feel like she needs a lot of layers to be able to bring in all the nuance that she wants to bring in. But she has made a great compositional choice.
She's very interested in capturing elements of what's in front of us rather than the whole, and it's very, very subtle.
Judy is tackling mainly the sort of sweeping drama of that building, the Museum of Liverpool.
Judy's used the museum to push the whole composition and cram in the old part of the town on the right side of her composition. I think it's very dynamic. I think it's really an interesting device.
The best thing about it, I think, is the lamppost that she's painted. But I want more paint, I want more colour. It's too sketchy at the minute.
Nathaniel's giving us quite a wide-angled view. Are you happy with what he's doing?
He's just responding to different flecks of tone and colour, and he just puts it on, and slowly, on that yellow ground, we're getting a sense of place.
It's interesting for me because for Nathaniel, with his submission, it's so tight. And actually what he's doing today is just really loosened it up. It feels more playful. I think that the cobblestones are stunning.
Matthew, dabbing away, making marks. He seems to have all the time in the world.
He got his composition well sorted out early on. What we're not seeing yet is a certain sort of thickness of paint, gestural mark making.
I hope that he stays as relaxed as he is and doesn't get into some speedy flourish to add more detail, because I think the detail will ruin it.
Anil's using the edge of his canvas as a kind of notepad almost.
Yeah, he's very interested in perspective. He used artistic license in the submission. He's done the same thing with what he's painting today. But there's no mood to his painting yet.
I think Anil is an artist who is so interested in developing new stylistic approaches, and he's trying to play with the space. Whether or not at the end that translates into a good painting, I don't know.
Well, the sun is shining. The artists in the pods are beavering away. The wild cards are working away. I think this only means one thing. Who wants an ice lolly?
A lot of paint on that palette. It's come already preloaded. So what's the next stage?
Next stage is to work in areas quite quickly. I'll make the colours on the palette and I'll just apply one small area with the larger brushes. I could ruin it with a few brush strokes right now if I'm not careful.
OK, yeah, you could come and do my downstairs bathroom with me.
Behind us, Georgina, there are quite a lot of people watching what you're doing. How's that sitting with you?
Doing a big painting, which everyone can see. It does scare me quite a bit. Just trying to get as much paint as possible, and then I can fine-tune a few things. I want to focus on the buildings.
Right.
Because that's one of the most famous buildings of Liverpool.
I like the way the liver bird is sort of hovering at the moment above it.
I hope he's not going to fly away. Yeah.
Situated at the estuary of the River Mersey, the city of Liverpool has been one of Britain's most important ports since the Middle Ages. By the 18th century, its strategic location had transformed the city into a centre for global trade, with cargoes of sugar, coal and salt shipped in and out of the docks.
The environment would have been really busy. Goods were being loaded and unloaded by hand. Every sack, every crate would have needed armies of people to move them. The ships themselves as well would have been moved around the docks by gangs of dockers kind of pulling on ropes.
However, in a dark period in the city's history, this trade was not only in goods, but also in people.
The trade in enslaved people from West Africa drove the fortunes of the city. And there was a triangular trade that Liverpool merchants built up, which involved goods leaving the port to be traded for people, Those people being shipped across the Atlantic to Britain's colonies in the Caribbean. And then the produce that those slaves were responsible for gathering and producing was shipped back to Liverpool to be sold on. So it's a difficult history, but I think there's an argument for being honest about the reality of it.
Although the transatlantic slave trade was abolished in the UK in 1807, Liverpool continued to play a major role in global commerce, and its waterfront was constantly expanding to keep up with demand.
By the kind of early 1900s, Liverpool was probably the second biggest port in the world. The Albert Dock was built in 1846 as a sort of fireproof warehouse, so it's made of brick, iron and lead. And it was responsible for storing, high-value goods, so things like cotton, spices, tobacco, rum.
However, within 20 years, the Albert Dock was already too small for the next generation of container ships powered by steam. And by the early 20th century, the once thriving docks on this site went into decline.
By the 1970s, these docks were entirely derelict. The city and the docks were very kind of intrinsically linked, and the fortunes of both were tied to each other. So when the docks did decline, the impact on the city was huge.
In the early 1980s, a major programme was launched to regenerate the Royal Albert Dock, and it's now a popular visitor attraction where locals and tourists can learn and reflect on the city's complex history.
You can see all of those periods of kind of fortune and decline, of slavery, of commerce. Yes, you've got the history, but it's a site that can be used for the future as well.
Behind the pods, our wildcards have been working hard on their artworks all day. And as they approach the end of their challenge, things are getting a bit hairy.
You're right, Emily, quite franticness to this enterprise.
Yes, it's needle felting. So it's good for frustration, very stabby.
Are you in a good mood?
I am. Sometimes I need to listen to some really aggressive rock music to
get into the stabbing.
To get the beautiful composition.
I'm exhausted just talking to you.
This is a big view.
It is.
How did you approach it?
Well, considering I don't paint buildings or water, with some trepidation.
OK.
I'm a Leafy Lane sort of painter.
Right. Well, you've done a really good job.
Oh, thank you very much.
They've valiantly tackled a range of views, from the Royal Albert Docks and Tate Liverpool to the River Mersey itself. But only one wildcard can be selected by the judges as today's winner.
Congratulations. You're our wildcard winner today. We really, really love the way in which you got a very, very quiet corner in this incredibly noisy scene that we gave you. And a lovely composition, full of mood and a little bit romantic. Congratulations, well done.
I'm very surprised to be chosen by the judges. I'm just, flabbergasted. The most delighted person will be my partner, because they probably didn't expect me to win.
Sue Billings from Leeds will enter a pool of wildcard winners from all the heats, just one of whom will be chosen to compete in the semi-final. Back at the pods, there's just half an hour left of the competition, and the nerves are beginning to show.
I have occasions, moments of thinking, this is going well, and then a little bit of, no, it's not, get on with it. I think they might say, why did she start on a huge piece of paper and then she cut it down so much?
On the foreground, it's getting a little neglected, so I need to sort out the two sides and then go back to the foreground. And I hope I'm not going to do too much and ruin it all.
I'm going to start adding a little bit of detail, but not to kill it. It's not quite going to plan in certain areas, but getting a decent painting done, that's what worries me.
On Liverpool's historic waterfront, 8 artists are nearing the end of their day's painting, with just a few minutes left to complete their artworks. But for some, it's already time for bed.
So, Matthew, this show famously doesn't give painters very long, 4 hours to paint. But you, Matthew, you had a sleep at lunch. You said you're going to finish early and have another sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you need a duvet or a pillow or something?
I can sleep on anything, literally, it's fine.
So I'm going to leave you to get on and rest.
Hasn't quite turned out how I like. Really need to get into the orange brick at the back because I've left that very raw, and then the foreground as well with the boat, and a little bit of everything. I'm feeling even hotter than before and even more panicked.
It shrunk drastically.
And I realised there was an awful lot of black paper around, so I started cropping wildly. But I'm happy with it now.
What will it mean if you go through?
It would mean that.
Read it.
I'm just looking for the last few changes I can do to make a difference, but ideally I'd have double amount of time now.
Artists, you have 1 minute left. 1 minute. Somebody wake up Matthew. Artists, your time is up. Please put down your equipment and step away from your easels.
It's been a great day. I've loved it. And it's brilliant seeing all the other people's work and what they've been doing. It's inspirational.
Just one of our 8 artists can make it to the semi-final. So while they get a chance to cool off, the judges begin by narrowing the selection down to a short list of 3.
Wow, what a glorious sun-kissed day we've had.
Yeah, it's a really challenging location for sure. There's so much going on.
But they've all found so much colour.
Matthew, I think, was onto a winner right from the start, the way he set up the composition. It's got great tension. And there's a painterliness, which we saw in his submission. I have problems reading the mast with its trailing ropes. Otherwise, it's a really nice piece of painting.
It started out very pretty with that blue sketch. As the days progressed, he's introduced these sort of darker passages, and I'm pleased that he did that. It's given it a fantastic mood.
I think with Matthew, you can see its roots in his submission, whereas with James, I can see being such a lyrical landscape artist into his vegetation. He was out of his comfort zone here. Having said that, his idea of this old building being sort of threatened by the 2 modern buildings, I kind of quite like that compression.
James has got these 2 worlds colliding. It's almost like you've got the Italianate hot south in the background and then the sort of Nordic noir with these Scandinavian buildings that are almost going to sort of eat them up and challenge them. What I love about Rose is she's given us fragments of the day, the fragments of the boat mast, fragments of the Great Western Railway, and the way in which the ropes of the masts are sort of leading the eye across and down the paper, I think are really effective. They're just lovely little touches.
I was a bit unsure about Rose using this black paper, but then when I look at the compositional choice that she made, there was actually a lot of black in it. And it gives her something very moody and evocative.
And Neil, I love the way in which so much happens in Neil's head, and all of that thinking is weirdly at odds with what actually looks like quite a conventional picture.
Of all the artists today, he has really done a spectacular job on the Museum of Liverpool. It's a strange, incredible building, and I feel like the way that he's allowed those paintbrush marks to settle on the surface is really evocative of the way that the building catches light.
Nathaniel has given us all the busyness that we saw in his submission. You know, that took 10 years. Who'd have thought he could do this in 4 hours? I thought we'd be coming back in 2033 to see how far he'd got.
But what he's understood is all texture. We get the sense of the cobblestones. We get the sense of the rough, dry dock.
And I love the way that you kind of really travel through the picture on the cobblestones. I think it's great.
I love Judy's composition. I think the way the interesting bit of the city is crammed in the right-hand corner, very sort of scrubby, sketchy. It looks like a cathedral in Spain, and then you've got this modern building sort of pointing towards it.
I'm not a great fan of Judy's slightly messy style. It sort of feels incomplete to me. Having said that, I think that her Museum of Liverpool is the best one today.
Wesley's little station split up into these horizontals, so you have to actually walk across the boat with your eye and up and down the different stairs to get to the station. I think it's charming and evocative.
I think Wesley's given us the most focused presentation. It's very tight-knit, he understood the narrative, and it really is a labour of love to show us this old, forlorn, abandoned railway station. And he's done a lot of interesting things in the foreground of this picture, too.
I love Georgina's tones. I just love them. And that lovely burnt umber reddish colour that she's got there is just luscious. And the other thing that's so good about it is the way she sweeps us around that curve of the dry dock. It's just beautifully put together.
And I love what she's done with the Museum of Liverpool there, and the boat really be so undone.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost getting to abstraction there. It's an absolutely glorious colour palette, and it speaks very much of the weather today.
I've got a couple, for me, that are really, really strong I'd like to see in the top 3.
I feel I've got 4, so I just need to remove one.
I have got 3, but I do want to see the submissions to know, to get a better picture of what they're doing.
Artists, thank you for a wonderful day and for embracing the challenge so wholeheartedly. But the judges have decided which 3 artists will go forward to their shortlist. And the first artist is Nathaniel Fowles. The second artist on the shortlist is Wesley Smith. The third artist is Georgina Saunders. Commiserations to the rest of you, and thank you again for all your hard work. Thanks very much. Thank you.
The judges must now select a winner, taking into consideration both today's work and the artist's submission landscapes.
I've rarely seen a more exhausted set of artists than today's bunch, and I don't know whether that's a combination of the heat, but also wrestling with the complexity of that view.
Yeah. We have been mean today. There's just no 2 ways of putting it. I mean, mean.
You put Nathaniel's painting today next to his submission. You really see where his interests lie, can't you?
I think what Nathaniel's really good at is helping us travel across. You know, you travel across the water in the Battersea Power Station and you travel across the cobbles and the dry dock.
Today's painting has the same complexity and denseness. What's interesting, his buildings have a weight to them. Although there's less paint there, there's less detail. So he's found a different way, a different language of getting all that information across.
I think the consistency that I see across Wesley's, which I didn't see before because the palettes are so completely different, is his love of light and shadow. And it's so present in the work today. But when you start to take apart his submission, so the shadow of the bollard, and there in the right-hand side in that shop is a beautiful lamp.
And today, the real star was the Great Western Railway, the building that's sort of been neglected. And he's definitely trying to create these atmospheric pieces. And for me, they're very filmic. I'm very impressed by him.
Looking at Georgina's 2 pictures side by side, it's fascinating to me how often there isn't very much detail when you really analyse it, but they get so much across.
Georgina is quite interesting in the sense that she's given us 2 extremely different landscapes, but both of them she understands proportion. So really understanding how to create space by giving things certain importance, different size of brush marks as well.
In both pictures, you can see that she's really masterful at capturing distance and all the light between us and these things. I mean, what unites them is this beautiful mark making. You know, every brush mark is like loaded with light and energy.
Well, that's a lot of positive comments about all 3 artists. You're going to have to pick one and one only. Nathaniel, Wesley and Georgina, you've all done incredibly well to get this far, but only one of you will be joining us in the semi-final. The artist who the judges has selected is Wesley Smith.
Really happy. I was chuffed before just to get to the 3, but I'm absolutely speechless.
Wesley's art is just incredible. Like, the detail is fantastic. A very worthy winner.
Good job! Oh my God! I'll buy you dinner.
Yeah, you owe me dinner, right?
Yes.
Wow.
I think Wesley today found a scene that really excited him, and that's really interesting for us when an artist can make great editorial decisions and give us such a strong narrative. I mean, he really showed us that train station, and when you saw it next to his submission, you really understood who he was as an artist. One's nocturnal, one's a bright city scene, but yet they have the same language, and it's something we want to see more of.
Well done.
I just was really surprised. Very, very surprised that they picked me. But I'm excited. I'm going to keep practicing and come back with something, the next thing.
If you'd like to be a pod artist in next year's competition or want to find out more about the work of our featured artists, visit skyartsartistoftheyear.tv. Next time, we're at Hever Castle Lakeside in Kent with 8 new artists ready to take the plunge.
If we have a lot of wind, then I'm going to struggle getting these clearer reflections.
A tricky technique that's a cut above the rest.
If the lion no goes horribly long in the last half an hour, I'll perhaps ask you for a canvas and some paint.
So who will be drowning their sorrows?
I've got some nice colours, but need to make a little bit more sense of it.
And for whom will life be but a dream?
I'm now sitting here enjoying the weather.
Sarah Lancashire stars as the pioneering American TV chef in a nostalgic nod to the 1970s. Julia, the brand new season, available now from Sky Atlantic.